Welcome back, everybody, to the Warm Down Pool. Dan the Man, Flack, and Eric Skelly back once again this week. A little bit delayed from last week because it's been a busy time for both of us trying to get our schedule synced up. But we wanted to kind of talk a little bit today about the evolution of training, I guess is the way to put it. But I think this is going to be a fun episode because it's definitely been a hot topic along the world of coaching as well as from the swimmer standpoint. If you follow any of the message boards or comment sections or other podcasts that are out there, this topic has been all the rage. So, Dan, I'm excited to talk with you about this.
Me too. This should be fun. What's happening, everybody? Yeah, this should be fun. It's a good thing that this is definitely going to spark some thought and debate, and it's a topic that I am very much looking forward to. Before we get into that, I want to congratulate Coach Eric on his new gig. He is now the new head coach at Lake Forest College in Chicago, and he's been trying to find a house out there this week, among 70 million other things. So making a transition from job is never easy, but congratulations. Looking forward to it. Can't wait to see the results. I know you're going to kick ass, and that'll be pretty awesome to see.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I've had a great run down here in southeastern Kentucky. Love my time here. Had a lot of fun working with some great athletes and getting to know a lot of good people. But right now, this is a transition that is going to be great for my family. I'm looking forward to that. My wife is originally from the north side of Chicago, so I'm taking the Cubs fan back home, is what I am, which is great. My son is a Bears fan because I failed as a father to convert him to being a Cleveland Browns fan, although I don't know if that's a bad thing all the way around, but I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that one, but
I grew up with it. It can't be helped at this point. I've always told my wife, I said, you know how loyal I am? I'm a Browns fan still to this day. And she's like, I never have to worry about you ever again, do I? I'm like, nope. So, but
tough being a
we're
Browns fan this year. But there's always another game, right?
There's al the motto of a Northeast Ohio fan, "There's always next year." And right now, we got the Cavaliers, the Guardians look great. I don't know how the minor league hockey team's doing, I hope well, but, oh, Cleveland, you break my heart. But getting back to the subject at hand, one of the things that has been sparked a lot of, I don't wanna call it controversy, it's really sparked conversation is obviously the latest world record to drop in the long course 50-meter freestyle for the men. Cesar Cielo's supersuited 50 freestyle finally goes down. Cam McEvoy does the damage, and 20.88 is the new world record. But where it came from is where it's really sparked the conversation, in that he's doing somewhere between, I think I just saw a workout posted between 300, 1,500 meters worth of work. And it's really gotten a lot of people talking in the coaching world. It's gotten people talking in the athlete world. The spectators want to know questions. I'm no different. I want to know what's going on. So I think it's really important that we sit down and kind of break down the format in which he's doing things and have a better understanding, because we can speculate all day. And again, the comment section is ripe with discussion. But I think for us as coaches, we need to have a better understanding of how we got here.
Yeah, and that's part of the thing that I'm excited about for you is that one of the things we've been talking about your new job. You're excited to try some new things out and have a whole new crew to work with without any kind of prior conceptions or whatever. And it's a great opportunity to really try some new things out and see if they work. That was a really cool thing for me to go to high school coaching because it's very different. I'm a big believer in let's get you ready for the race that you're actually competing in. Training to race, not training to train. And it became crystal clear to me pretty quick that in high school swimming, there's only 3 races longer than 100. So every single person on your team, you really better be pushing that speed component with them. And that's what I 100% did, and it really prepared me to go on to be a college sprint coach and have some pretty good results with that, and kind of got me prepared for that. So this is going to be a fun topic to talk about.
Yeah, I think the big conversation that from coaches that I've talked to, and we all know we have the traditionalists out there that are still doing yardage, and it's worked well for them, and they've had success. The argument that is always made is, and it's the one sentence I hate the most, because we've always done it that way. But I've also heard wrong school ain't wrong, or old school ain't wrong school. And I'm not going to disagree with that as well. I think there's a comfort zone for a lot of coaches, and they go with what they know, and with that comes a certain level of success. So you have to ask yourself as a coach, are you willing to break the norms? One of the things early on in my career, I started out as an age group coach in Decatur, Illinois. I got an opportunity to go to the National Age Group Coaches Clinic, which at that time was held in Lake Placid, New York. Awesome time. Got to meet some wonderful people. A lot of them I'm still friends with to this day. And I heard some great speakers. Paul Stafford, who had been Natalie Coughlin's age group coach, Mike Llewellyn, big time age group coach in the Midwest and had been with Mission Viejo for a while. But the keynote speakers were Milton Elms and Bill Boomer. And say what you will about Bill and Milt, they had their own style. There's no question about that. But one of the things that Bill Boomer always talked about was changing your paradigm, changing your mindset, changing the way you reflect on things. As a young coach, didn't understand it nearly as well as I do now. I have a better grasp of that concept of being able to take what I've done, and I think I've had some good success where I'm at, but could it be better? Can always be better. We learn from our mistakes. We learn from our successes. And I think, especially for me as someone who is a former 200 stroke swimmer, I did the longer events. I was not a sprinter by any stretch. As a distance swimmer, wanted to be a sprinter, just wasn't. It wasn't in the cards. I think that I have always struggled to find success consistently with my sprinters. So I'm looking forward to changing my paradigm in this way. And one of the things that I think you and I talk about it, it's not so much we're training athletes to race as we're adapting them to race. And I think that's the biggest shift in mentality you've got to make, as not only as a coach, but also you got to get your athletes on board. And a lot of these coaches are our brethren in this sport, as well as athletes. They see it and they don't know it. And I'm no different. You and I have had some great conversations on this. I've talked to a few other coaches as well. But the pushback, man, I don't know about you and talking to people. The pushback I have gotten is just, it's actually a little concerning that we're not open to it. And it's not just older coaches like you and I are, but it's younger coaches. So I think it's about changing the mindset of the way we train. I've always been an advocate for other sports and how we can incorporate it. And track and field has been doing this for years.
Yeah.
You don't see 100-meter and 200-meter runners doing repeat 800s or anything like that. They are technical to the core and they are power all the way through. So that's kind of been my take on this as we've been discussing it.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I know coaches have come up to me on deck and asked me, how I'm training kids at a certain time or whatever. Some of my stuff is not conventional. It's a little out there. And they kind of get frustrated when I tell them, and I'm like, well, you wanted me to tell you what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing. And, it seems to be working. I'm pretty pleased with the results so far. I did love it when you sent me that text, I don't know, in November-ish when, you had a boy go 19 in the 50 and you're like, "Hey, I'm a sprint coach now," I got a big kick out of that. It's like, "Look at you. There you go." But, to make the pun, there's a million ways to fry the fish, and that is one of the biggest things in the art of coaching, in my humble opinion, is, figuring out what works for each swimmer. And, not be sometimes if you've got a group of, say, 8 kids, you might have to write 6 different training sessions, to get what they need, and in my mind, that's part of the fun of it. That's part of the fun of putting the puzzle together, and I think and this new world record and the approach that has been taken, it's another piece of the puzzle that
Yeah,
jumps off the page to people.
agreed. And I was very fortunate. I spent 3 years as an assistant coach at the University of Nevada in Reno. And while I was there, the head football coach was Chris Holt. Chris is is a Hall of Fame coach. Colin Kaepernick was his quarterback at the time. But one of the things that struck me about Chris, while he was there, they did something at Nevada that had never been done before in the history of college football. They had 3 1,000 rushers in 1 year. Incredible. And he developed the pistol offense, not just the pistol formation, but the pistol offense and how it was run. And it blew me away because it's set up in what looks to be a spread option offense. It's actually a run first mentality, although it looks like you're going to throw the ball like crazy. But what struck me is I knew Chris's earlier career. He was an air raid, throw it all around kind of coach. And Trevor Inslee, who was a wide receiver for him, still holds the NCAA record for most receiving yards and in a season with over 2,000. And I asked Chris one time, I'm like, you were throwing it like crazy, and then he stepped aside to be the AD at Nevada for a while, and then he came back to coaching, and now you're pounding the rock on the ground. Why the shift in your mindset? And Chris was older, but he said, I went with the personnel that I had. I did not have people to run an air raid or spread type offense, as people called it, or as you and I growing up, it was the run and shoot back in the day with Houston and Jerry Glanville in Atlanta. He goes, I had a lot of guys who could run and could carry the ball well. And with that, he goes, I developed the pistol offense to maximize their ability. And also, because I had quarterbacks that were stationary in the pocket and could throw, and now I had guys that were mobile. How do I utilize that? And he had that with Kaepernick, Vitower, and Luke Lickbencott. Almost said his name wrong. And from that, a lot of coaches wanted to learn how to do it. But it showed me as a coach that here's a guy who Hall of Fame career changed. I mean, he 180'd it and created something very special. So I think that's the thing we're going to talk about it more than anything is we've always done things certain ways. There's the color chart system that Jim Richardson and John Urbanchik have always utilized. I've always been a fan of Dave Salo's work with his time at Nova Aquatics and USC, and now he's with Herbie out at Arizona State. There's been some other coaches, Mark Schubert, legendary for the amount of yardage that he was throwing in and stuff. So I think that this is going to rattle some cages. Want people who hear this to understand we're not advocating like you should just dump everything that you do. We want you to be able to feel comfortable how you're coaching, and we're trying to present something that's more of an alternative to what you may be doing, especially if you're working with high school age kids, you're working with sprinters at the college level. Because I can tell you right now, talking with a couple club coaches, their little kids, like their 11 and 12-year-olds, is like, well, Cam McEvoy's only doing 400 yards, 400 meters. Why can't we? Okay, well, let's understand where that all comes from. So let's talk about it first. What exactly Cam is doing and having an understanding of how he got here.
So, in my talks with folks and watched a YouTube series on basically what a week looked like for Cam. Here are a couple clear concepts that are kind of non-negotiable. What I saw was he suits up just about every practice. He does not swim every day. As a matter of fact, it looks to me like he does a lot of swim a day, gym a day, swim a day, gym a day. And the gym work and the weight room work is equally, if not more so, as important to what they're doing. Everything is timed. The most minuscule details are timed. And it's interesting that it's a very small training group and there are about as many coaches as there are athletes. There might even be more, and data collectors, etc. But you're dealing with hundreds of seconds, and that kind of precision is going to be required and in the training to produce the sort of results that you're looking for. Basically what he's doing, the best that I can tell, is he's got three speeds that he works on. Okay, there's warming up speed, which is nice and easy and getting a feel for the water, very short. There is race speed, and then which is pretty self-explanatory. And then there is a submaximal speed, which is about 90% of race speed. One thing that I noticed was once once the speed is not exactly what they're looking for in a particular session, they shut it down. They don't keep on, trying to hit that nail, if it's just not going to go in anymore. And I've always thought that's a very smart way to do things. And like I said, everything is timed, everything is tracked. And just watching him, it's beautiful freestyle that he does. Beautiful freestyle. His shoulder caps are way up out of the water, which I've always been a big proponent of. He almost, I call it kind of spearing the water over the water. He doesn't have the ginormous kind of, say, Fred Bousquet, who I always love the way he swims, and kind of the way Dressel swims as well, with that big over the top recovery. His is a little shallower and a little more darting forward. There is no breathing. We're not messing around with any breathing. And I think the other thing to really understand about this is he's no longer going, 50, 100, 200. He's training for the 50, period. And I believe that as we get coming up on LA and the Olympics and the 50s being in, I think this approach is going to extend a lot of careers. You are going to start to see men and women, like men like 28, 29, 30-year olds staying in the sport and giving it a shot, uh, kind of taking this approach. So there's that combination of three, it looks to me as 3 sessions ish in the water, and then those gym workouts are standalone on that day, and they are critical, and a great deal of measuring in those. So, it's quite honestly, not everybody's going to be able to do that, right? If you're Joe Club Coach, right? You've got a group of 25, 30 kids. You maybe have 4 lanes to run it out of. And you have to have that membership to pay the bills, right? That's always something that oftentimes is a real consideration. But in my mind, you can absolutely take at least a little bit from this. I resort back to my high school coaching experience. We practice sprinting everybody on the team every single day. Again, because high school is very valued with us. We did great in, USA swimming and swimming and international stuff as well. But for high school, like I said earlier, we had to have speed. So we practiced it every single day. We devoted a chunk of time to it early in our session because here's the thing that would happen as well. One of my favorite things I used to do was I would set out, here's my, maybe in October, say, I'd say, okay, here's going to be my ideal lineup at our state championship. And I'd always laugh at how different it ended up being at the end of the year. The best laid plans, they never quite turn out. I had 2 years where I had a relay all set. We were probably gonna win the national championship, and I get the knock on the door, "Coach," one of the boys, "He's got food poisoning. Yeah, he's out of the meet." "Okay, well, you gotta change that whole relay." Oftentimes, I didn't have the luxury of I had to use my 500 freestylers, um, in our free both of the free relays oftentimes, and I took a lot of pride that everybody who went under 4:25 as a high schooler for me could go under 20.4 on a relay as well, and, the funny thing was that speed work that they did to go the 20.4 with a good relay start absolutely helped them do that giddy out speed uh, to be able to go 425 or 420 or 416 or 414, whatever, because it allowed them to get out at the time that they needed to get out in that first 100 easy. Anybody can go out like a maniac and do it, but then, good luck around lap 13. So it's really, I see a lot of value in it. I hope coaches watch what's going on. I've always been like, okay, the best swimmers in the world, what are they doing? Swimming, football, you name it. So much of athletics is copycat. So much of business is copycat. They're being very successful. Let's do find out what they're doing and let's try and mimic it the best we can. So, but it's going to be real interesting to see how it is applied. And I'm excited to see how careers get extended because I think, when we swam, there's barely anybody over 21 for the men's Olympic team, and once you were done college, you were done. You really didn't swim. It was time to get a job and move on with your life. And it's so exciting to see that uh, careers can be extended. Because who's to say that you can't do your fastest swimming at 27, 28, 29? There's plenty of people now that can do it.
Yeah, and I think one thing that you mentioned it earlier, it's a small training group that Cam McEvoy is in right now. The number of coaches is probably 1 to 1 or possibly even 2 to 1, who knows, or 1.5 to 1, depending on how many people are on the deck. I think that's the one thing that people need to take away from this from a coaching standpoint. We can talk about wanting to race every single day, but it's gathering that data and creating those metrics to understanding even something as, I don't want to say simple, but how far are we getting out on our breakouts? We're measuring to a point on the pool deck. Okay, they're getting out 12 meters off their dolphin kicks or 20 meter. So who knows on the first stroke, whatever they're measuring there. These are the kind of things that I think are going to start to be more important than lactic acid measurements. I mean, that was the big one during the 90s. Remember, the strips were on the pool deck and we were testing lactate acid or blood tests and things like that. Probably not the most hygienic way to do it either back in the day, because those little lancelets that they use to prick your finger, my God, those
As
you might as well stab me for those.
right, as were the Russians, as were the East Germans, as were the
Yes.
West Germans, as were,
Yep.
again, copycat.
Yep. We talk about race pace training, and Dr. Brent Rushall was the one who really kind of broke through with that. And obviously, Michael Andrew has had a lot of success with it. He's now back with his father, Peter, doing that after spending some time with Herbie at Arizona State with Sun Devil Aquatics. Rushall did not advocate for the weight room, did not advocate for technical work, drilling, things like that. He said it clearly in his DVD collection. He also in the papers that he wrote. I've read all of them, and I remember Dave Salo coming out in an interview talking about it. And again, Dave's one of those guys who's been doing that since the late 80s, early 90s. If anybody has the copies of Sprint Salo out there, there's a lot of what Cam is doing yep, I have it as well. I joked with Dave one time when I saw it at a convention. I said, "Yeah, I have your book." He goes, "Oh, you're the guy that bought that one." And I'm like, "Okay, well, I think more people bought it than that, Dave."
I've got
But
it,
he,
and it's so crusty and it's been, because I've had it at pools, et cetera,
yep.
it's a mess, but they're the best books.
I have that, and then I have a PDF version that I found online a couple of years ago that I send to especially young coaches that I've gotten to work with, so that way they have a copy themselves. I just tell them, "Don't print it out and ask Dave to sign it." I think he'll be a little bitter that it's out in PDF form at this point. And Dave took heat for that type of training. I remember because I think Sprint Sailor came out in 1993. That was my senior year of high school. And I remember coaches even back then screaming on Mount High about how this is just sacrilegious and this isn't going to work. And then he throws
Speaking a
Amanda
different
Beard.
language. He was
Yep.
speaking a different language.
Yeah. And then he throws Amanda Beard on the 96 Olympic team doing it that way. And then 2000 with Aaron Pearsall, Haley Pearsall, I believe, made the open water team as well. And Rebecca Sone. And he's worked with so many other athletes. And he's constantly evolved what he's doing. If you look back at his workouts from 5 years ago, it's not what he's doing now. So he's constantly evolving that. Being efficient in training, I think, is the most incredibly important thing we can do for our athletes. A few years ago, the CSCA convention, Matt Barney, the head coach at the University of Richmond, excellent conversation and discussion on sleep and passive recovery for athletes and the studies that are coming out and the importance of sleep. And this is something I've heard multiple coaches echo. And I put it in a Facebook group one time. I asked the question, why are we still doing doubles? Why are we doing two swims in the morning? And it's the one interaction I've had with Mark Schubert, because he responded by saying something along the lines of, "Well, how else are you going to get 18,000 yards in?" Okay, well, that's your style, Mark. But I was asking the question, but I also heard from Salo was one. There was a few others that said, "I'd rather get one efficient training session in than two that are mediocre." And how many times early in our career, you and I both, and I'm probably speaking for you here, but I know for me, if I got to an hour and a half in a workout or an hour and 20 minutes, man, I was throwing garbage yardage on the back end of that thing like there was no tomorrow, just so that I got to use the whole 2 hours. Do you? Do you?
Correct.
And
Yeah.
I've had times where I've had distance swimmers who've pretty much been swimming straight from a warm up through their presets and then they're hitting their main stuff. They're getting done in an hour and a half. And the sprinters are doing the full 2 hours, but they're incorporating more passive and active recovery in between. They're being efficient. We're doing stuff that's timed. We're doing brokens, things along those metrics. So I think it's about being the efficiency over the volume is kind of the mentality that people are starting to shift away from. I've never spent any time on a pool deck with Todd DeSorbo. I've heard he's very much like that. I know Braden Holloway. I've heard from people that know him that he tries to be. I've seen enough of the pancakes and practice videos on YouTube and Swim of being very efficient with how they're training. He loves his kick count work and underwater. I've seen some of those sets, which I think is awesome. I think Cam is taking it to the next level, but I think you brought up a very important point there with Cam. His technique is flawless in a lot of ways, and it's not the hooking method like you see with Dressel, Alain Bernard, Freddie Bousquet, some of those bigger, bulkier sprinters. And you're right, he's not training for the 200 anymore. He's not training for the 100. I think that's what people are missing though with this is that his technique, they've got to be doing a lot of analysis and watching video, which is critical. And that's the
Yes.
thing we've got to take away from this. And that athletes are like, I only want to do 500 yards in a workout. Well, if you've got perfect technique or near perfect technique, we can start going that direction. But if you're not grabbing water properly, I worked with a coach one time, whenever he talked about DPS, which we traditionally refer to as distance per stroke, he referred to it distance per shoulder and getting that crowning like you were talking about and being efficient with that. And it didn't make sense to me at the time. As I've gotten older, as I've started working more with athletes, specifically sprinters, it makes a lot of sense now. It really does. Thinking about that high crown and really driving it and spearing it forwards. I want people that are hearing this to understand that we're not advocating doing 500 yards or 500 meters in a practice. There is foundational work that has to go into it.
Correct. Yeah. Yes. Correct. Yeah. His shoulder cap clearance is phenomenal, and I'm a big fan of that. That's one of the first things I look for when I watch somebody swim. I talked earlier in this about conversations on the pool deck with coaches, and coaches getting frustrated with me because inevitably a lot of times they would ask me, "Oh, how much yardage are you doing?" And oftentimes I'd be like, "I don't know. I can give you I can give you ish. I can give you a pretty good guess, but I'm not exactly sure, and it doesn't I'm very concerned about, what we were doing that was actually relative to the race. Like 2018, I had a high school boy named Trey Freeman, and it was at nationals out in Irvine where they're picking a bunch of teams, so everybody was there. It was a real nationals, and he finaled in the 200, the 400, and the 800, and those are very different races, especially for a high schooler. And people would come and ask me about him, and I'd say, "Look, he doesn't swim nearly as much as you might think, because in my mind, if you do it right, an 800's not that long." Uh, but I'm like, "So I don't know how many yards he could tell you, but I can tell you week to week, how many 50s he pushed to his feet at 26.3. That I can tell you how many hundreds he pushed to his feet at 56.4, because those were kind of targets that we would use." And so, and this is what's going on clearly. Like one of the sessions I saw online that Cam did, he was hoping to get 3 or 4 of a 20 at a certain rate, a certain time, and he was struggling a little bit to get them. And the second he got 1 or 2, the coach was like, "Okay, that's it. That's all we need. We've touched that today. We don't need to do that more." I learned a lot during COVID about this style of training because all of a sudden everything's very limited what you can do and very kind of compartmentalized. And you had to be incredibly efficient with your time. And I remember in the spring, we finally had, so normally our state championship for high school would be in February, but because of COVID, it got pushed back to, we ended up doing it the last weekend in April, and it was at a couple different sites, but we cobbled together the best we could do given the circumstances, because there were certain places where there was no meet, period. And um and both boys, girls, long stuff, short stuff, all over the place. We swam great. And I was like, "Okay, what the heck did we do? All right, what did we do?" I know we did a lot of stuff different. And from then on, I was like, "Okay, I think this worked, this really worked." And I made sure we incorporated that into our training. We did our best swimming when we started doing 2 mornings a week as opposed to 3, and those mornings were on Monday and Friday, so it was 3 days of sleep rest in between. They started later than before, they were shorter. I do believe, I'm a big believer in, hey, you gotta swim fast in the morning, because if you don't swim fast in the morning, there is no night. So,
Especially now at Division 1.
Woo!
especially
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yes. And especially like what a lot in my case, I'm taking high schoolers to nationals. It's a very different swimming prelims in heat 2 of nationals versus against older people when you're bringing high schoolers to the meet, as opposed to cruising the morning session and then you're in the final and you pretty much know it's either going to be you or one other person that are going to win. And you can pretty much dictate your race and do things the way you want. Those are very different competitions. Greg Troy told me about that when I very first started coaching, and I was like, "Ha that he's right." So that stuff I think is just really important. But it's interesting to see. And if you can take anything, if you're a coach, you're a swimmer or whatever, in my mind, if you could take one thing away from this podcast that we're doing, is don't be afraid to try different stuff. Don't be afraid, it might be a cluster. There are a lot of things I'm like, yes, that worked. I also used to keep a book, and I still do, that says, okay, I'm never doing this again. This did not work. Now, a lot of that stuff was actually kind of procedural stuff out,
Hmm.
we're not staying at this hotel anymore or whatever. It was, but that all impacts the performance. Um, and yes, that was a book that I kept each year. So, but don't be afraid to try different stuff, and see what works and figure out what has value and use that. Don't just throw the baby out with the bathwater.
I agree with that. And I was in the same situation you were with COVID. It was very interesting being at the school I was at. We had restrictions that major year that was 2021, where everything was still locked down. We were masked up most of the time. We couldn't use the weight room really. We were allowed to have a maximum of 35 people in the weight room at a time. I had a roster of about 60 that year, and we shared weight room time with another team. So that meant I didn't have half my team in there. I had maybe a third, 25% at worst. So we didn't lift at all a year. We had a lot of dry land equipment, kettlebells, med balls, things like that. We did a lot of body weight work. I had pull up bars already installed in the pool. These were things that we could utilize for our training. And we swam great that year. We really did. And again, we figured out what worked. We figured out what didn't work. A lot of what we do, yes, there's science behind what we're doing. There's no question about it. We understand, for the most part, basic physiology, or you should understand it. Even idiots like me who are terrible at the sciences, I understand the physiology side of the sport. How do we get to a point where we're applying it and being efficient in our time? And I think that's the conundrum. And you get asked the question, I get asked the question by recruits all the time. Well, how many yards do you do in a workout? I don't know. I don't count. The computer program I use, Commit Swimming. Shout out to Commit. Hit us up for some sponsorship there. Cheap plug. But Commit will calculate that for me. But one of the sets that I love that Dave Salo did all the time was an XYZ set, where X is a certain distance, Y is a certain distance, Z is a certain distance. Well, if you put XYZ into a workout, it's not gonna give you a number, and I saw some of the stuff you did at Penn State. It's not tallying numbers.
No.
It's guessing, but we're detailing what we need to accomplish with our athletes. And I think being deliberate in what we do is very important. And I think what people misunderstand about race pace, because they've seen what Rush all did with and what was done with Michael Andrew, this is not just about going over and over again to failure. This is about, if you want something at race pace, okay, then do 400s at race pace if you're a 500 freestyler. Do 300s at race pace. Make sure you're incorporating proper rest in there. Do them to failure. Do them at threshold, whatever you're calling it. But putting them in a situation where they're racing every single day and utilizing that to adapt to the races themselves. So when they get on the blocks, at a dual meet, at a conference championship, they're racing. They know how to because they're doing it every single day in practice. And I think that's where we're really at right now with the sport. And I think people oftentimes miss that when they hear the words race pace.
Playing with different stuff is really critical in watching the information that I could gather on what's going on down there and how that 20.88 came about in the training. The smallest little details, everything is measured, timed, and measured and charted, which I think is super important. I always tell people, the simplest way to get better is figure out what, take a video of when you swam your fastest, right? And I'm going to put this in simple terms. Take a video of when you swam your fastest, what your best lap was, what was your stroke count, what was your tempo, what was your kick count, whatever the case may be, what was your breathing pattern, blah blah blah. Understand those metrics and then try and replicate that as often as you can in training so it becomes not just what you think about, but it's just what you do. That just becomes what you swim. And I think that's one of the beauties. I studied the Michael Andrew USRPT stuff big time. And that was one of the things that I took away from it was it's simply replicating your best swimming over and over and over and over and over again. Again, I came up with a set that really or a progression that I applied to 500 freestyles that was had great results and very predictable results as well. And it was all based on 75s for a 20 lap race. So it's called people call it component training, whatever you want to call it. I just looked at it as replicating what we're trying to do in competition over and over and over again in practice. But it's exciting watching his gym work. His leaping ability is measured all the time. They have a couple machines that he uses to generate power in his pull. And these are things that most Division 1 college programs have, and it's combining it with when I got to Penn State, we had a brand new strength coach who knew nothing about swimming, and I just sat down with him and I said, okay, there are a lot of things I have to have be explained very simple, and then I get it, and I just said, okay, the all I want you to do with this sprint group here this year is just get them to jump higher. Anything we can do to get them to jump higher. First of all, you fly through the air a whole lot faster than you go through the water, right? Explosiveness off the walls. Just focus on that. I don't want you to mess with anything else. The core stuff, all that, I'm going to take care of that at the pool. We're going to do plenty of that. And that really worked. It really helped him, and it gave a guy who was coming from a soccer, football, and hockey background a better appreciation for what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I've already had the conversation with my new strength coach. I told him flat out, "Is like, look, I want him to be able to jump through the roof. I want him to be explosive, and I know how we're going to utilize it in our facility, and what we're going to utilize. I'm very fortunate the team already had power towers, so I'm going to use a lot of that, especially working on dolphin kicking, making sure they have that kick count with resistance. These are the little things." Like what you mentioned in the weight room, just deadlifting is important. RDLs, I've always been an advocate for overhead squats because I think it engages every aspect which you need. You get that great lower body, you get core stabilization and shoulder strengthening and stabilization. I would make people just overhead squat with just the bar, just so they learn how to control its movement and utilizing that core connectivity. And I think that is something that's big and it's something that it's challenging, but if done correctly, the benefits are huge. I love doing weighted jumps, just even doing a goblet squat to a jump with a kettlebell or something like that, or a med ball jump, something along those lines with resisted explosiveness to help with that vertical jump off the ground. Box jumps. I've never been a huge fan of box jumps, only from the standpoint of people, especially depending on what the quality of the box jump is, you're going to eat it pretty bad. So I think that's the next component is being able to replicate. If you don't have the ability to get into a gym, just like we talked about with a lot of strength programs don't have that, or college programs, specifically high school and club, they can't always get into a weight room facility. So that's something as well is that you can replicate it in many different ways to utilize it. And I think it plays a big part of the development of these young athletes towards those events.
You're exactly right. That's another thing that I saw come out of COVID. All of a sudden, like 18 months after COVID, you got all these boys all of a sudden who like all of a sudden like it used to be a big deal to be able to go like 20.5 and a 50 free for a high school or a club kid. Now there's all kinds of people are doing it. It was a big deal if somebody could go 44 low. Now a bunch of people are doing it. And I noticed this after COVID. It was specifically showed up with the males and specifically showed up in short course. not as much in long course, and I'm like, "Oh, duh." There was nothing else for those kids to do during COVID was, make a gym, garage, do sit-ups, do core work, you know, and become better athletes. There was nothing else for them to do. You can only play so many video games. Well, I guess you could play video games all day if you wanted them, and
My
I'm sure
son
some
does,
people
that's
do
for
that
sure.
too. But I know there are a lot of kids, because you'd see their setup that they'd come up with in their gym or out in their driveway or whatever the case may be, and I was like, "Aha, this is the unintended, outcome of, something that you never saw coming down the pike." So, again, be curious, people, be curious. Because that's the great thing, you got this thing called the internet. If you really wanna find out about something, you can do it. You can do it. So back when I was like on the, in the 90s or the 80s, you'd be on the national team and they'd present you with this information, but then they'd say, don't share this with anybody else, which was crazy to me. I never understood that. I was like, well, sorry, I'm going to share it with people. It's not some big government secret anymore.
I
But
think that's something too that we as coaches now more than ever, it's especially because of COVID, I think we're becoming more collaborative. I know I'm going to the CSCA convention in the beginning of May. I'm looking forward to it, to connecting with people and listening to people talk. But on top of networking, sitting down and talking with people about how they've been able to put together their seasons as well as what they found worked, what didn't work. You can gain knowledge from anybody. And I remember this a few years back. There was a coach. He's no longer in the sport. He got out of it a few years back. Man, he took guys that were 22.5, 22.7 coming out of high school, girls who were 26.1 ish. All of a sudden, they're going toes on the women's side, 23 highs. The guys are going 20 points left and right. And I asked him, like, what are the things that you're doing? And he said, well, first of all, I look for athletes. I want people that first thing I ask him was like, what other sports do you do? You play soccer? Okay. You run cross country? All right. But I'm just trying to, I want to find athletes. And he was great of grabbing those high school lonely kids and making them elite. And at the Division 3 level, you have a very similar training schedule in terms of your calendar. It's a little bit longer for college than it is for high school, but he was able to adapt that beautifully. And I called him. I said, hey, I'd love to talk to you about how you train. And he goes, you do know if we had a dual meet, you guys would beat us. And I go, that's not what this is about. You've, as I think I quoted in our setup for today, I said, did Cam McEvoy unlock a side quest? And I felt like he did. Another guy that definitely did this, and he comes from the physical education background. Say what you will, because he's a little controversial, and it was Sam Freeze. Sam Freeze produced results everywhere he was at, whether it was Allegheny, LSU, Arkansas. He produced interesting results at Hawaii. We'll just call it what that is. But then at Oklahoma, I got to see it firsthand at Oklahoma Baptist. Some of the stuff that he was doing, he has a DVD series. He wrote 2 books. His second one, Sprinting 2, It Takes Guts. He broke down exactly how he trains. And I think his categories are fast, ultra fast, and super fast. That's how with warm up, and that's like that much. But Sam loved to sprint. Now, he did have some guys that were the kings of the fly and die. That might have been a little bit excessive for them to take their 200 breaststrokes out the way they did, but hey, they went after it, and he's right. It did take guts. Those guys were the outliers in the coaching world. Dave Salo, Sam Freeze. I'm sure there's some others that I'm missing out there who've dabbled in this or made a career on it. But you're going to see that more and more now that we're, like you mentioned, the 50s a stroker in 2028. They're in LA. And we've already seen some names. Ryan Murphy is back in the water trying to, I guarantee you, Murphy ain't doing the 200 backstroke. He's going after that 50 and that 100. And he wants to be efficient with it. We're going to see Dressel going after probably the 50 free and the 50 fly. I don't know that he's going to go after the 100 fly or the 100 free. He might just for relay purposes, but right now, and I talked with D1 coach, a Power 4 guy. I'm not going to name names on here, but I asked him, like, how are you getting dual meet results that are breaking school records? Because that was unheard of in our day. That didn't happen unless your school records were really bad and you were really good. But they're suiting up more in dual meets. They're being more efficient with how they train. The one thing that I'm going to be interested about from a training perspective is how people are, and Dave Sale has always referred to it as fine tuning, how people are resting or tapering for these championship meets based on this methodology and based on this training or adaptation that they're doing. That's going to be the one that I'm going to be very interested in talking with people about. And I would love to get some people on this show, and you and I'll talk about who we can reach out to and see who we can get to talk into a microphone for us. But that's going to be the interesting one, because I think that's the big question a lot of our coaching brethren have is, how do you taper off of 500 or 600 meters?
Yeah, that will be the trick. That will be it. But people crack the code. People figure it out. I have no doubt about that. People will get it figured out, and all of a sudden, times we never dreamed of will happen. We did our NCAA thing. One of the thing I felt bad about not mentioning was you got girls, plural, going 139 all place now in the 200 free. Plural, not just one, plural. And it's not that far-fetched that in another year or two, that's gonna be more of the norm, more of the norm. And I found it very interesting at the men's meet. I thought the 200 free was very deep, and everybody's like a zillion people at 131 low, but very few breaking 130. I think only one boy did. Credit's boy leading off their relay. I think he was the only one. And uh, I then looked back and I found it fascinating how few people were doing the 50, 100, and 200. You know, they were doing the 50 and the 100, and then maybe they did 100 of the stroke.
Agreed.
How few people were on both the 800 free relay and the 200 free relay. Very few. Certainly nothing like even 5 years ago. So it's, I always tell people, pay attention at meets. There's stuff going on. There's knowledge to be learned. Pay attention. Are you watching what's going on?
I'll agree with that. And I think you saw a little bit more of that 50, 100, 200 at the women's meet than you did at the men.
Yes.
As you mentioned, if they're doing a third event, that's going to be 100 a stroke. You're not seeing that nearly as
Not
the
many.
100, 50, 100, 2. Back in the day, Gandhi did that, Gustavo Borges, even as recently as Chris Giuliano was doing that. Jack Alexi would do the 200 freestyle, but we knew that wasn't what he wanted to do. Brooks Curry was another one, but the only one that I can really think of that was a finalist in maybe all three of them was the God, I can't remember his name, but the young man from LSU this year. He might have
Yes.
been the only one off the top of my head, but Caribe, Liendo, these guys were not doing that. And like you mentioned, there are more 139s than we've ever seen. Let's be real. 42.9. I think Haroon was third in the 100 fly. 42.9 in the 100 fly was third.
Third, yeah.
What? What universe are we living in now? I'm old enough to remember watching Joe Hudipole break the national high school record and go 134 in the 2 free, and that would have been second at NCAA's his junior year when he set that record. And now we're at a point where 34 doesn't even get you in the meet.
No.
Not even close. It doesn't get you anything at the Division II or Division III national championship. It might get you into consoles, maybe an A final if you're lucky, but you're seeing people train more now for the races, train specifically for them, and it's trickling up with the distance. 500 freestyles getting ridiculously fast. That's turning into an over. I think I used to call it a tactical sprint. That's how I referred
Yes.
to the 200, and the 200 is a stroke. They're tactical sprints. Well, the 500 is that way. The only events in my mind that, and I'm probably wrong on one of them. The only events that are competed at the collegiate level that are not that way, Division I, Division III, NAIA, because Division II has the 1,000. You have the 1650, but we both watched that mile and how fast that was. Who knows? That maybe that's just a longer sprint. And the 400 IM. That's only the only other one that I can think of that you really can't be overly aggressive on just because the changing of the strokes. But I could be wrong on that as well. People may be training to be efficient. I had a friend tell me one time, well, the 400 IM is just 4 100s, one each stroke fast. Yeah, I've swum that event. That's nice in theory. For a non-breaststroker, you overswim the first 200, you're eating it. There's no question about that.
Yeah, I've always said that if it's in a pool, there's a speed component to it. There
Yes.
is distance swimming in our sport, it's called open water. But
Yes.
if you're doing it in a pool, you're gonna need the speed component is going to need to be addressed because you're gonna need that gear at some point, no matter what the race is. But, I think the takeaway we've had a God, enjoyed this discussion. I think what we really gotta convey to folks is, be curious. Be curious. Pay attention to what the fast people are doing. Be curious and don't be afraid to play with stuff. Don't be afraid to do something different. If you fail, you fail. You'll learn from it. But I think that's really important, both with coaches and with the athletes. Um, you know, if you keep on doing the same thing, you're going to get the same time. That's the way it usually turns out. So I think there's a opportunity for that.
Well, it was Einstein's favorite quote, "The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results." I think we've got to continue to push boundaries in what we're doing. I think we have to be willing to challenge ourselves as coaches to try new things. I knew a coach, one of the most positive individuals I've ever known. I've never heard him say a negative thing in my life. He goes, "I've never failed at anything. I've been incredibly successful in finding ways that don't work." And
Yeah.
I loved his spin on that. He's just an incredibly positive person. It's almost sick. You almost want to slap him, and just to the point where he will get angry, but I've never seen that from him. But he's right. We're finding new ways to be successful. We're finding new ways to fail, and we learn. I've always learned more from my failures than I ever have as a coach than from my successes. And I'm in that time right now where I have an opportunity to reflect on what I did well this year as a coach, but I'm going to a brand new program. So I'm going to be trying some new things. You and I are going to talk about it, and I'm going to reach out to a lot more coaches to find out, okay, how do we make this efficient, and how do we get people consistently, even at a small D3 program in northern Chicago, how do we get them going 19 and 43s consistently? How do we get them racing that way? And how do we replicate that for other distances as well? And if we can start cracking these codes, we're gonna see more research. We're gonna see more conversations being had with coaches on podcasts or at conventions. I think the more Cam McEvoy is showing people how to be efficient in the training, people are going to start taking note, and it's only going to keep moving our sport forward.
Yep. Yeah. So we're having folks, we're having a lot of fun doing this podcast. It's these come up on YouTube and Spotify. Want to reach out to us? We'll include our social media stuff, and if you got a topic that you want to talk about, or you want to come on and chat with us, drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you, because the swimming community is a great community, and there's a lot of information to share, and that's what we're all about.
Yep. And as our athletes are always doing, they're sitting in the warm down talking usually about me. So that's why we're here. So for Dan Flack, this is Eric Skelly. We'll see you next time on the warm down pool.